Hello everyone, this is Speak It. Remember, if you can read it, then you can speak it. And that is why the title of our story today is Roy and the Oyster Toy. And we're learning to read with words having the sound OI. Good. Let's start. Roy was an orphan and lived in a small house with his poor old grandfather. Roy was supposed to be a schoolboy, but he was a busboy at Mr. Troy's big restaurant down the town. Roy was employed as a busboy a few weeks after he got a tiny oyster toy as a birthday gift from his grandfather. Take this tiny oyster toy as your birthday gift, said Roy's grandfather to Roy. Roy's grandfather then sailed in a little boat on a voyage to buy soy flour in the city. On the day Roy was employed, Mr. Troy, a flamboyant man, arrived at his restaurant in his convoy very early. He chose only Roy as his new busboy out of all the people waiting to be employed that day. Roy was loyal to Mr. Troy and would not take part in the various ploys against Mr. Troy at the restaurant. A loyal staff deserves royal rewards, said Mr. Troy. Mr. Troy then deployed Roy to another, better section of the restaurant. After he was employed and deployed by Mr. Troy, Roy believed the tiny oyster toy is the reason for the favor he got from Mr. Troy. Roy then turned the tiny oyster toy into a trinket, and he would often put it on his neck. During free time, Roy only enjoys playing with the Oyster Toy and not with other toys. Roy would even get annoyed at anyone who touches his Oyster Toy. Most of his friends would only laugh at Roy's boyish behavior whenever he gets annoyed. One day, Roy went with his friend Joy to check on a trap Joy's father set as a decoy in the river. Fish had destroyed the decoy, so Roy and Joy wanted to get the trap out of the river. When Roy and Joy tried to pull the trap out of the river, Roy's tiny oyster toy fell into the river. Roy became annoyed and believed losing his favor attracting tiny oyster toy would make him lose his job. Roy did not go to work but stayed by the river, setting more decoys into the river. Roy hoped to catch the fish that might have swallowed his tiny oyster toy. Roy did not catch the fish that swallowed his oyster toy after 3 days at the river, except for a shining live oyster. Roy realized that he would lose his job for not being at work and not because he lost his oyster toy. I have to see Mr. Troy before he leaves in his convoy, said Roy as he began to run back to Mr. Troy's restaurant. Roy met the king while running to Mr. Troy's restaurant with the shining live oyster in a bucket. The king saw the shining live oyster in Roy's bucket and offered Roy a job at the palace for the shining live oyster. Roy accepted the king's offer and believed he would enjoy better royal rewards if he works harder in the palace. After his experience with the king, Roy now believed every oyster, either toy or live oyster, attracts fortune and hoped to get more oysters someday. Good. And here is the picture dictionary of oyster. Good. And before we go, let's see words with the sound oi and their pronunciation in the story. Busboy, Roy, Troy, Toy, Joy, Soy, Ploy, employ, deploy, convoy, decoy, annoy, schoolboy, lawyer, royer, boyish, voyage. Good. And we've come to the end of the story today. And see you next time. Bye.